Democrats will start World War III to stop Trump, warns Tucker Carlson. Here's a clip.
Tucker Carlson made a bold prediction while speaking with Adam Carolla. He said that in order to defeat Donald Trump in 2024, Democrats will start a hot war with Russia. In the event that such a thing occurs, my friends, we are probably looking at World War III. Because any kind of conflict between the U.S. and Russia would likely trigger, well, actually, no, it literally would trigger Article 5 of NATO, pulling basically all of Europe into a conflict with Russia. Of course, Russia, being a part of the BRICS nations, would then call on its allies and welcome to the fray.
Yep.
Now, I think
welcome to the jungle.
Tucker Carlson is mostly wrong here for one simple reason. Now, in essence, he's correct. I mean, it's a bold prediction. It may or may not happen. I don't know. But what I mean to say is we are already at war with Russia, just not formally declared in any such way that triggers various treaties and, say, Article 5 of NATO. In which case, Tucker should probably say they will formally declare war on Russia. And if this prediction is true, oh boy, you know what this means? It does not mean that Joe Biden comes out and says the war crimes that we've seen happening in the Donbass must be stopped. Vladimir Putin must be held accountable. No. My friends, in order to justify a U.S. declaration of war on Russia, you will need an attack on a NATO nation. Could be the United States, could be Poland.
Could be a false
Poland
flag.
being particularly close to the conflict. There's a lot of concerns. That could be the case. Not to mention you have, Latvia, Estonia, etc. And now we have the story about a drone strike in Moscow, one of the most severe Russia is blaming on Ukraine. And there's questions about where the drone strike may have originated from, because if it did originate from a NATO nation, then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to World War III. Russia, under attack by NATO, declares formal war or reaches out to China and says, now's the time. The U.S. being split in various combat theaters, such as the Pacific and Eastern Europe, China takes its opportunity to move on Taiwan, and welcome to the fray. We've got a lot of military operations happening in Australia right now. And this is not a coincidence. It looks like we're gearing up for a major escalation to war. The question, I suppose, is Tucker Carlson correct? Well, it's hard to know for sure. I mean, saying that there's going to be a hot war with Russia to stop Trump, I can see that happening.
Yeah, me too.
In my mind, I see
too.
this as a decent probability. That doesn't mean it's an overt, it's not a guarantee, it's not a foregone conclusion. Maybe decent probability just means 7%, but it's there. It's like looking at that roulette wheel spinning around, that ball's going around, and you got two spots on that wheel that says war, war. Now, there's a bunch of things that could happen, but I think war may be one of them. Why? Let me read for you what Tucker Carlson said, and then I'll explain why I believe he's actually making a really good point. There's a complicated view to what this is, but it makes a lot of sense. Former Fox News host Tucker Carlson predicted a hot war with Russia would be used by opponents of former President Trump to beat him in 2024. He says, they will do anything to win. So how do they do that? They're not going to do COVID again. Whoever on the right is afraid they're going to do COVID and mask mandates, they're not going to do that. They can't do that. They've already been exposed. That won't work. There's going to be, no. What they're going to do, what are they going to do? They're going to go to war with Russia is what they're going to do. There will be a hot war between the United States and Russia in the next year. It's more than that. He says they need to declare war footing in order to assume war powers in order to win. I believe that, and I think that the evidence suggests that's true. So if you're worried about our politics getting like even more than it already is, and people being hurt in our politics, which is entirely possible, you should be worried about the prospect of an open. We're already at war with Russia, of course. You see, he knows this. We're funding their enemies, so we're fighting Russia. But I mean, an open battle with Russia where we say we're at war with Russia. I think that could easily happen, I think we could Tonkin Gulf our way into it. Where all of a sudden, missiles land in Poland, the Russians did it, our NATO allies been attacked, we're going to war. I can see that happening very easily. I completely agree with Tucker.
Yep.
I completely agree.
Yep. So do
Daily Caller mentions the Biden administration announced in July plans to send Ukraine M864 155 millimeter artillery shells known as dual purpose improved conventional munitions, which dispense smaller explosive weapons over an area to attack personnel and vehicles. Cluster munitions are controversial due to the risk posed by dud submunitions that could cause harm to civilians long after conflict is over.
They'll do it still.
You also got the UK sending depleted uranium tank busters, which Russia says is the use of nuclear weapons. Oh boy.
I could see their point.
Let me break down a little bit and get into what Tucker is saying. I think he's right. It's not so much that Democrats are so unhinged that they must defeat Trump and they will go to war to do it. It's that Democrats want to go to war, and it is an opportunity to defeat Donald Trump.
Yep. Win-win
War
for them.
powers will give Joe Biden tremendous political edge. There's a lot they can do.
Russia.
There's going to be universal mail-in voting. They're going to executive decree ballot harvesting legal everywhere and say, ladies and gentlemen, we are in a serious crisis, blah, blah. They can make up whatever reason they want using emergency declared war powers, and people will be terrified. Here's the real scary thing. Tucker mentions
all of that.
A missile strike in Poland. And then it's, oh no, now we must go to war. I think it could be worse than that. In order to get the U.S. in order to actually build up public support and be warned, this matters, they will try to trick you. He says Tonkin Gulf. Y'all know what that is. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, where the U.S. lied about an attack on one of our ships to justify entering the Vietnam War. Now that generated a lot of public support, but
that is
not
proven.
Enough. And there wasn't enough public support, so ultimately what ends up happening is you get mass protests, and then eventually the U.S. is forced to evacuate. We, ask a historian, did we lose? Whatever. The fall of Saigon. There's a lot I don't know about when it comes to Vietnam, but we did not do well. We got defeated for the most part. I think that's fair to say. What would the U.S. need in order to justify overwhelming public support for an attack on Russia and an escalation into direct NATO-Russia conflict? Americans would need to die. So what happens? Well, maybe a missile hits Poland and it kills a bunch of American soldiers. No, I don't see it.
That wouldn't be
enough. I don't see
enough.
that being enough.
Has to be on U.S. soil.
I think it's going to have to be some kind of large-scale strike, which Russia would dare not do, which means the likelihood would be if the U.S. does want to enter a conflict, they need a false flag attack. Of course, y'all know what false flags are. Like I mentioned, the Gulf of Tonkin, that was a false flag.
It's crazy.
You attack yourself, you lie about or exaggerate.
Tim Pool a few years ago, I don't even think would touch false flags, and now he's bringing this up. This guy, it's how everyone's going, man. Everyone's like, okay, you start to wake up to one thing, and it's just slowly, you start realizing all this other stuff. Very interesting.
That happened to you and blame your enemy. Then you muster up public support. Imagine here in the United States, let's say a water reclamation plant blows up, disabling water for 200, 300,000 people. Crisis. But it's on par with East Palestine. A major disaster. Biden rushes in by helicopter and he says, "My fellow Americans, it is clear that this plant was taken out by an act of sabotage by Russian forces. A cyber attack, evidence points to blah, blah, blah." Then the experts come on and say, "We believe the attack originated from insert country. A group known as this, that has taken credit for it, and it'll be a false flag." Now, I don't know exactly what happens. But then you'll have people in the city screaming, demanding help. Biden flustered, saying, "We are doing everything we can." You take a look at Maui and how much money they sent to Maui. Very little. You take a look at how much money they sent to Ukraine. What'll happen in the event of a false flag? Don't be surprised if they send tons of money to this disaster site because it is effectively the Ukraine war effort. You'll then get some government response saying we are desperately trying to deliver supplies to this metropolitan area. Maybe it's a town of 300,000 and their water's completely shut off. Emergency trucks coming in. And then we hear that people are dying. Or something like this happens.
People aren't going to die from a water
industrial
shortage in America.
Sabotage through the internet, a cyber attack. Now, I don't know that will happen. I am not suggesting it will happen. I'm saying consider the possibility that you will be lied to. I'm sure the media is going to run wild and be like conspiracy theorists, blah, blah, blah. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a hypothetical scenario I am not literally saying it is going to happen. I'm saying,
of course,
one
not.
potentiality based on history, such as the
Hopefully
Gulf of Tonkin
it
incident,
doesn't happen.
would be the U.S. exaggerating or falsely claiming it has been attacked. Why? They've done it before. Based on history, I suggest there is a probability it could happen. There's also another probability. We are at war with Russia, and Russia does decide enough. The U.S. is supplying weapons to Ukraine, and it's time for a strategic strike. That's also a real possibility.
No, I don't think so.
And maybe we've already been attacked. There was a cyber attack.
If after the Nord Stream pipeline blew up, if Russia didn't retaliate from that, no, I don't think Russia would do anything like that. They just want the land bridge for the Donbass region, and that's what they're looking for. An all-out war with the United States would not give them that at all, and they know it.
Back on oil infrastructure, you guys remember this? We talked about it last night on Timcast IRL. Gas pipeline was shut down due to ransomware. That's scary. Ransomware shutting down the grid, shutting down our energy production. And then what? Ladies and gentlemen, war were declared. Tucker may be right. We are going to see something truly tremendous so that they can stop Donald Trump. You know why? Oh boy, because of this story.
It would have to be bad, which is really scary.
You have no choice. Trump tells Glenn Beck he will absolutely lock people up if returned to the White House. Do you believe that they will allow Donald Trump to come in and arrest them? Yeah, come on.
It's funny because people like Tim Pool, even he's just like, no, I think that Trump lost the 2020 election because of mail-in ballots and COVID and stuff. But then he's just like, they won't allow him to win again. But it's like, maybe think about that a little bit, Tim.
But I don't know what's going to happen. Let me lay it out very simply. There is a real possibility of war. There is a real possibility of conventional, straightforward military conflict. The U.S. has not formally declared war against Russia, but anyone with a brain knows that we are at war with Russia. I don't even think it's fair to call it a proxy war. There are U.S. citizens on the ground fighting in Ukraine. U.S. military personnel, special forces are in Ukraine, providing logistical support. We are supplying weapons to Ukraine. NATO is supplying weapons to Ukraine. You do not get to, imagine how absurd this is to have to effectively hire 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, maybe even 10,000 people to fight on your behalf, give them a bunch of weapons, command them, tell them what to do, and then say, but it's not us. I'm not talking about Ukrainians. I'm talking about U.S. volunteers and PMCs that are actively on the ground. Yeah, sorry. Russia knows what's going on. It's this, we live in this world where people are trapped beneath this wall of rigid norms. They can't see through. The example I often give is how people think contracts are law and definitive. Yeah, let me just remind you for the 800th time. You can have a contract with someone that is ironclad and a judge can say, nah, and rip it in half. It's meaningless. It's open to interpretation because we are humans. This idea that warfare must be Congress issues a declaration of war, the president then agrees. It's not been that way since World War II. It does exactly what he wants when he wants. Doesn't matter. So for Russia, when they are looking at U.S. citizens, private military contractors with U.S. weapons and U.S. logistics, and the flagship of their Black Sea fleet is blown up because of U.S. intel and U.S. weapons, do you think Russia's being like, well, it was U.S. weapons. It was the U.S. that gave the intelligence to the individual who pressed the button. But to be fair, it was a Ukrainian guy who pressed that button. Yeah, sure. Putting a U.S. intel officer grabbing the hand of a Ukrainian and mashing the button with it does not change the fact that the U.S. blew up Russia's flagship in the Black Sea. Donald Trump accuses Biden of cheating, election interference over DOJ prosecutions. Well, this one's obvious. We know it. So the only thing I think that actually may stop World War III, civil war in the United States. That's an interesting question. But if the U.S. starts to rip itself to pieces... He makes a good point, but that's scary. I'm sorry. The U.S. is ripping itself to pieces, and if it escalates to factional conflict, there's not going to be U.S. efforts overseas. We'd be done. We would not have the capabilities to command such infrastructure. I wonder if Russia and China know this. And
It's terrifying. War
I
or
assume
war?
they do. To be fair.
Oh,
There's a
they
lot I don't
definitely
know.
do. They definitely do. TikTok, they have all the data. China knows this, and they're pushing more with TikTok because they have so much influence. Look at what they ban and look at what they don't ban on TikTok. China's pushing us into a civil war. They definitely know.
I have a cursory understanding of what is currently happening. I have a surface level understanding because I am a human being who lives in the United States and simply reads the news. And there are people in Russia and the US who have access to secrets we do not know about. Russia probably knows more about what's going on in the US than you do.
Mm-hmm.
Fact, because the news doesn't report a lot of things. I mean,
well, not only that, like I was just saying, TikTok, and then China's an ally of Russia, so yeah, they'll tell them.
That interview with Tucker Carlson, he says that Obama gay and that Obama does crack. Okay, and that was known, but nobody wanted to report on it because you'd get cut off from the campaign and then you could lose your job. Okay, yeah, sure, maybe, I guess. We had that letter come out that said Obama, fantasized about banging dudes. Hey, more power to him, I got no beef.
Yeah, who cares?
I'm just saying, there are things you probably
Especially
don't know about
Obama's
that are
not
true.
irrelevant anymore. Or Obama's
I don't know
not relevant anymore.
Where we ultimately end up without access to that knowledge, I can only make predictions based on what the news says. And that being said, you take a look at TikTok. You take a look at the Eugenia Cooney thing where she's like morbidly ill, skinny on the verge of death. And she's getting 8 million views.
It's gross.
TikTok is absolutely promoting, I don't know how to describe it. It is cultural influence that is warping and shattering the minds of young people. Overt groomers and pedophiles on the platform, poisoning the minds of children, morbidly obese
TikTok
individuals, encouraging people to eat garbage and harm themselves. It's just all of this content is actively encouraging self-harm. Imagine a U.S. media apparatus that said, hey, kids, do you want to be a big influencer and get 1 million followers every day? Do 10 push-ups when you wake up, run a mile, and eat healthy. Don't forget to eat a high-protein diet, eat your vegetables. None of that. They're saying eat ice cream, be fat, and don't have kids. That's what they're getting from social media.
Be transgender.
Chinese-owned social media. So I think they're well aware. What prevents war? Trump is accusing Biden of cheating. He's right. There's no question about it. In the event conflict erupts in the United States, and man, I just got to tell you, we are so blind to what it could, would, and probably will look like if conflict erupts. And everyone just assumes all the time you're going to get like Florida, Ron DeSantis coming out and be like, we're going to be seceding from the union. We've it and it's over. That's just never going to happen. The U.S. is split. There is a constitutional republic currently battling a multicultural democracy. Multicultural democracy, of course, means cult. It means idolatry.
Exactly.
It means fall in line or we punish you.
Yep.
And the constitutional republic basically means live and let live and let's work together and then, compromise so that we can live together. The multicultural democracy has no illusions of such a thing working or existing in their grand system. So what happens? Tucker Carlson says they'll start a hot war with Russia. We're already at war with Russia. He's correct. And but they'll formally declare. That won't be possible if the U.S. is embroiled in internal conflict.
They might try it anyways.
You understand about the revolution.
Who knows?
The U.S. War for Independence. It was a long time coming. It was a 20-year period. The Constitution didn't come about till something like 10 plus years after the Revolutionary War.
I bring that up all the time when people are like, you couldn't, if you didn't have a federal government, everything would just be chaos. I'm like, how much government was actually active on a large scale during the Revolutionary War and then the period after? We didn't have any giant federal government doing all the stuff that they do today. But then you say, hey, imagine if you gutted all the federal government. Oh, no, that would be chaos. Everything would break. It's like, okay. Somehow right after the revolution, it happened. People could say that's a long time ago, which it was. But it relatively, at the same time, at the time, look at the power London had over people and everything. So, and then there was just no government during and after the Revolutionary War, and people got along okay. They had state government and local government, but those were really small. And again, no federal government, and it still worked out.
It wasn't until the Treaty of Paris that the U.S. formally gained their independence. And you can make the argument. The argument is the U.S. gained its independence in 1776 with the signing of the Declaration of Independence. But I don't think so. I think that's wrong.
I don't think so either.
If the founding fathers signed the Declaration of Independence and then Britain came in and just massacred them all and took the land back, the Declaration of Independence would be nothing but a terrorist decree. And the history of this country would be that the crown quashed extremists who were trying to overthrow the government in an insurrection. So it wasn't until we won the war with the treaty and signed the Treaty of Paris that we were actually an independent nation. Amazing. Anyway, what could happen? Well, in the event that there is some kind of internal conflict, history will be written in very interesting ways. But it will be impossible for us to maintain a war with Russia if we're fighting ourselves, which is why I bring up the American War for Independence.
Well, what's interesting is Tim Pool says we're kind of like in a Cold War, Civil War anyways, and then he's saying the same thing about Cold War with Russia. So it's like, could you even maintain a war with Russia now? It's a good question, isn't it?
There are a couple reasons why the colonists won.
I mean, especially with, sorry to keep cutting Tim off here, but especially with, like all this stuff that's going on with, with Russia's civil war and all this. It's like, how can you even do this? Sorry, I was going to say something. I lost my train of thought. My apologies.
Do you believe that the colonists won through...
Oh, right. So, yeah, with the military is already, they can't even recruit anybody. They can't recruit anybody. Everyone's either too weak or the people that should join the military, they don't want to join. They don't want to join either. So it's like, who's even going to go fight Russia? I'm not going to go fight Russia. Unless Russia's on the shores invading the United States, leave me out of it. And that's like what everybody is saying nowadays. Like, just leave, unless they're the people that are, I guess, actually fighting in Ukraine, the volunteers, they'll go do it. But aside from that, it's like, who's going to go fight Russia? You do a draft, most people just won't go. Like we were just talking about, like he was just talking about a civil war and everything. The war with Russia could trigger a civil war. What if what if 80% of the people they want to draft just say no? What's the military going to do? The amount of people that they don't have the weapons that the military does, but a lot of people in the military might end up saying no. Like, yeah, I wanted to defend the country, but I don't believe that we should be going to war with Russia, and I don't think it's real. If that happens, man, that's going to be crazy. And even if they do want to, what are they going to do? That's just going to start a civil. So they go and try to, let's say war is declared on Russia. They go and mobilize all the military. They send them to Poland, Ukraine, all this stuff. Who's going to be left to try to get people in the draft? And the draft for Vietnam, people hated it. It's interesting they even went along with it. But in World War II, because of Pearl Harbor, if you ever watched the show The Pacific on HBO, definitely check it out. Everyone wanted to go. People were signing up before the draft. You know, nowadays, people just won't go. They're just like, no. The life is too comfortable nowadays, and the information's just too... Everyone has all the information now. Back in Vietnam, no one knew who Vietnamese people were. Now you see on YouTube videos all the time, like all the manufacturers going to Vietnam. Vietnam's the new China and all this. And you can see people, you see interviews. So it humanizes people, you know? And I don't think, like most people, I don't have any problem with Russians at all. I don't think people do. People are like, okay, we don't like Russia, like they invaded Ukraine, but you think every person on the ground in Russia is part of that? Yeah, definitely not. I'm surprised how many people went to that draft in Russia, but I guess it was smaller and all the military wasn't mobilized. But again, like they mobilized the military in the United States and nobody wants to go. What are they going to do? It's just that it's going to be a dud. It's really interesting to think about.
Your grit and determination, passion for a cause that the British did not have, this fundamental belief that we are imbued by our creators with inalienable rights, and with that passion marching behind us, we defeated the Redcoats. You're wrong. Do you believe that we mounted a guerrilla war where we jumped out from the bushes and attacked the British as they marched blindly through the fields? Wrong. Yeah, it's much more complicated than that. Well, those things certainly play a role, let me tell you. The UK, Great Britain, I believe at the time, was embroiled in war in Europe. And so they were split and unable to maintain active conflict in the colonies. And they tried.
Yeah, and think of how far away the colonies are compared to Europe. It took them so long to get troops here. So if they would send them here and then send them back, like, wow, that takes months and months and months.
France came to the aid. The French intervention assisted the U.S. in their war against Great Britain and the Crown. Why? France didn't care about whether the colonies were independent. They were at war. They said, we need help to defeat the British. These guys are fighting the British in the colonies. Let's assist them and take out a key economic component of the crown, of the British crown. There were a lot of other factors that played a role. It was external funding that assisted the colonists in their war against the crown. And also, this idea that the colonies fought a guerrilla war is just not true. Well, it does play a component in the war. For the most part, the American War for Independence was conventional, with the Continental Army marching in the fields and firing the same as the British, the Redcoats, were doing.
It's crazy.
I do think it's funny that it was like blue versus red. It's like they're wearing red and we're wearing blue. Got to know who each other, who we are.
Yeah, no camo.
But there's a
So
morsel of
old.
truth to all of this. My point? The U.S. will struggle to maintain a war with Russia. And at this point, I'm not sure it's possible. So this is my
I agree.
counter to what Tucker Carlson said. I believe he makes a good point that they would do something like this. But if the U.S. were to declare formal war, even if there was a 9/11 style attack on the U.S. or a NATO ally, this country would implode. I do not see a scenario where
either.
Joe Biden could muster up public support for us to engage in active war with Russia, effectively triggering World War III.
We're too divided.
It may occur. I think about people like Ben Shapiro. Ben's a reasonable guy. He's a very reasonable guy. And, a lot of people are mad that he's very pro-DeSantis and doesn't like Trump. No, but I think Ben's a reasonable guy. And when you see something like the George Floyd incident, Ben comes out and says, like, this is bad. He's correct because he's trying to be just and reasonable. He's trying to call out injustice while still being a reasonable, good person. The left, of course, calls him a fascist and other nonsense, like that's stupid. The left will cry and whinge over George Floyd, but then completely ignore any other circumstance outside of their sphere of influence. They don't care at all about David Dorn.
Yeah.
But Ben Shapiro will say,
David Dorn,
injustice is injustice. So why I bring him up? In the event that there's a major attack on U.S. forces, NATO allies, or a U.S. piece of infrastructure that results in thousands of U.S. dead, Ben's the kind of guy to probably say, we can't allow Putin to do this. The United States does not just roll over and let our people be killed. Yeah. He would not be wrong. And I'm not trying to put words in his mouth. I'm saying he's the kind of guy who's going to just immediately be like, no, like conflict in the United States and culture war is less material than the fact that we were attacked. You would get a decent amount of support from Democrats and establishment conservatives for war with Russia in this event. However, the more libertarian factions, populist factions will say no. We should not have been involved in the conflict in the first place. It is our intrusion into a border conflict in Europe, which has exacerbated the problem.
Yep.
And the solution is not to make more war, but to stop.
Exactly.
Here's a potential. In the event the U.S. does go to war with Russia for any reason, you may have insurgent factions in the United States just outright say this is an illegitimate government going to war. You would see partisan conflict in the U.S. because you've got people who don't want World War III.
It's interesting. He's
now,
basically
what does that
agreeing
look
with
like?
what I was saying. And just to be clear, I didn't watch this
10 or 15
before.
guys
I'm
in a
just
small
reacting
town in
to
the
it.
middle of nowhere rejecting federal authority. I've talked about it before.
No, there'd be a
People
lot
need to
of
understand
people
it is
rejecting.
not out of the question for like 5 guys. Let's play this game. People on the right don't believe the Whitmer kidnapping plot because the FBI was heavily involved with informants and they were encouraging it to happen. And yeah, we know those stories. We had one of the individuals on who explained how they actually didn't even know where they were going. And the informant was the one who was supposed to be giving them the address. FBI was setting the whole thing up. And they even went to the wrong place and that hurt their case in court. So we know they do that.
Yep.
But to the left, certainly you must imagine if that's possible, then what I'm saying is entirely possible. What happens if you get 5 dudes who are just like, that's it. We're not going to be involved in this. And then
Again,
they
there
just
would be a
stop
lot more than
adhering
5.
to federal decree and federal authority, and they start acting as though the federal government.
I'm not
has no-
saying any of this, but they'll just won't. People just won't go to a draft. What are they going to do if people don't? What happens if you don't go to a draft? You go to prison. Muhammad Ali went to prison, right? So it's just like, what are they going to do? Put everyone into prison? It's like, come on, they'll just give up. It's just like, what are you going to do? Throw everyone into prison? Who's going to be managing all this? It just doesn't even make any sense. Then that's the less people that are going to the draft too. Who's going to manage all these people in prison? Who's going to build these prisons that are popping up now? It's like, I just don't see it.
Authority. They have no confidence. It starts there very small. And then if these things erupt in small pockets of seriously only a handful of people.
I don't think it will be small
This is
pockets.
what I try to explain
big.
to people. The federal government does not have the capability to quell 300, let's say 300 small areas of the country where a handful of guys are just like, we're going to do our own thing. And they start rejecting federal law. They start
especially during
acting
a war
as though
with,
the federal government,
especially during a war with Russia too. All the crazy military, all the craziest of military, they're all overseas. Now they have to worry about this. Again, I just don't see it. It's a different time than when this happened before. Everyone's so connected with the internet. Everyone's so lazy. I wouldn't say I'm lazy. Why would I want to go to war? But I just don't want to go to war. It's hellacious. People have seen all these movies all these years since Vietnam. I've seen the Pacific. I've seen like all this horrific stuff. The ones I don't want to spoil like anything. It's not really a spoiler, but there's one small scene where one of the guys, he goes and almost kills a girl, and then he's just like, no, and he leaves. You know, this stuff is just go watch the Pacific on HBO if you haven't seen it. That'll be like, okay, I'm not going to war. All of that stuff is just awful. Like negotiate. Even Xi Jinping, leader of the CCP, is a somewhat reasonable guy. He's not like Mao. He's not like Stalin. No one's like Hitler nowadays. They probably wouldn't get into power if they were. They might, like Putin might want to go take a land bridge in Ukraine and stuff like that. And just like, he's not going to just go crazy World War III and just go completely nuts. I just don't see it happening. Like, what I mean by that is, like, he'll want to negotiate. That everyone would just be like, okay, let's negotiate. Let's end this. The United States, if they're pushing for this for their own obvious reasons, like Tim is talking about, they won't. But the people on the ground will all be like, well, we're just not going to go fight. That's what I think anyway.
You should take a look at the West, where the Bureau of Land Management controls a lot. Let's say you get Ammon Bundy times 300. And it's not an issue of conflict. It's an issue of people just being like, I don't care anymore.
I don't want to go to war.
We need secure resources for our community. The government would not be able to do anything about it. They don't have the resources. That's the kind of thing that can escalate to major conflict. The Bundy thing's scary because the federal government comes out and they start torturing and imprisoning these guys. But what happens when you get 100 more of them? They can't do anything about it. What happens when everybody knows what the federal government has done
for some reason
with the January 6ers and with what they do with Bundy is illegitimate? What happens when people finally say, no, we're not going to allow it? There is always an opportunity for escalation, which we desperately want to avoid. I remember that story like 10 years ago or whatever, or longer, where that guy I think it was in New Hampshire, refused to pay taxes and they surrounded his house. That's crazy. And what happens if we get 100 of those all at once? The federal government does not have the law enforcement capabilities to actually quell any of that. And then if they actually get into an armed conflict and someone dies, now you're going to get more propaganda and that could bubble up. It's hard to know what will happen.
Very scary.
I don't know what will happen. There's all of these potentials around us, but it's fair to say that a lot of people think we are walking into World War III. World War III may have already started, and that this election is going to be bedlam. They're already trying to remove Trump's name from the ballot now in Arizona. What do you think happens? I don't know. I just hope that you are responsible, nonviolent, and preparing to protect your family however you need to with food, resources, water. There can be looters.
Nonviolent is the key.
But I'm just telling you, I think Tucker is right. And we'll see. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel.
Scary.
Thanks.
Very scary. All this talk is scary. But what can you do? It's bad. This is what's so bad about just like big federal government in general. They'll just go and try to push everyone into it. It's insane. Big government is what they do. You know, they'll just go and lie and they'll push us into it. And then the left, they don't care about war. They like the funding of Ukraine. A lot of people in the right do, but you want it to escalate to this. It's like, you go fight on the ground if you want that. You know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy, because I don't want any part of I mean, people, they were, Ramaswamy was on Fox the other day and they were arguing, and one of the hosts on there, Brian Kilmeade, I think his name is, and he's just like, oh, you want to give them 20% of Ukraine? Really? They've already occupied it. It's not like they're killing civilians that are there to get it anymore. They already occupied it. Why not? I mean, Crimea got taken in 2014. No one cared in Crimea. They're not going and doing a rebellion against Russia. They just left it. They're just like, okay, whatever. Just have it. I just don't know if it's worth all the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of civilians. And yeah, now there's drone strikes going and hitting Moscow. Now Russians are getting killed too. The civilians there too. They're not hitting military. The military is shooting down these drones and they're crashing into buildings in the city. So now more civilians are just getting hurt. It's nuts. Negotiate, give. It's at this point, 18 months. It's like, especially, I don't know. They're doing their counteroffensive right now. Ukraine is, but if this fails, it's just like, what are you going to do now? The counteroffensive also failed. You built this up for months. You hyped it up for months. It's not going so well, right? So now their only hope is to go drone Moscow. It's like, ugh, this is so dumb. Just give them the area they already have, and all that's destroyed now anyway. They ruined all of it. All of this is ruined, and I blame Russia for that. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you sticking up for Russia?" Absolutely not. No, I wish Russia wouldn't have invaded. But you do got to go back before the war, and diplomats were begging the United States to stop pushing, because they knew this was going to happen. If they kept pushing NATO and stuff in Ukraine, and they knew this was going to happen. So the U.S. could have just backed off, not worried about Ukraine, and then they wouldn't have invaded, because it most likely wouldn't have invaded. And then this war wouldn't happen. But now that the war is happening, and now it's 18 months later, it's like, negotiate, end the war, because this could escalate to World War III. It could get every NATO country involved. Could you imagine millions and millions and millions of Europeans and Americans, Australians, is going and getting massacred trying to invade Russia? Me and my friend were having a debate the other day. He thinks that Russia's winning the war and that Ukraine is just, it's all propaganda and they're not doing anything. He thinks that Russia doesn't have Kiev because they don't want it. I was like, I think both of them are losing. I think both sides, all this, the civilian deaths, neither of them have munitions. Everyone is losing. And he was just, and I said about a war with U.S. and China versus China and Russia. I was like, he's like, oh, that's crazy. You think that? I've said that the U.S. has a really good chance of winning the war, you know, especially you see the weaknesses of Russia in Ukraine now. And he's like, well, that's crazy. You think that the U.S. can invade China and Russia on two fronts? I said, no. Whoever's invading, in my opinion, whoever's invading, if the NATO goes to war with Russia and China, the BRICS nations, whoever's invading is going to be the one who loses. That's what I think. So just don't go to war, you know, just negotiate. Like, okay, these are the terms, which I've really before anything escalates more, is that it just seems kind of easy. Just be like, okay, end the war, right? I don't know. Like I said, like Ukraine is doing their counteroffensive. Let them do their counteroffensive. They already have all the stuff there. But if the counteroffensive fails and they don't take back territory, what's the alternative? They're not going to get it back anyway. Just give them it and quit the killing, you know? I mean, that's what happened with Crimea. There was not, like, was there any deaths in Crimea? I don't think so. I can't remember, though. Maybe there was. You know, all the propaganda from both sides. Who knows? There is propaganda from both sides, and you never know who's. I think both countries are evil. Both sides are evil. Zelensky, after the drones hit Moscow, like the first time, like a few month or two ago or whatever, he's like, "Oh, now the Russians, now the war's coming to Russia," and he knew they were hitting civilian. But he doesn't care. Both sides are just evil. They're like, kill civilians. They don't care. They don't care at all. It's wild. So. And I think the war needs to end right away. End the war right away. It's just, again, what's the point? Why would it, again, counteroffensive, but that's going to be over soon. Which, I mean, honestly, with the counteroffensive or not, end it now. That'd be ideal. But I understand, like, they're going to want to go and try to do that, to try to do their counteroffensive, which I get that. But after that, it's just like, if you can't take back the territory, Yeah, what are you going to do? That's crazy because Russia's like, okay, we want the territory, and then if you cede the territory, Russia's like, okay, we'll end the war, and then Ukraine's like, no, until we get every piece of territory back, which they might be even including Crimea in that. Until they get that back, the war's not ending. So it's like, they're just no compromise. And Zelensky doesn't even want to go to the table to meet with Putin and everything. So it's like, this is crazy. But yeah, no war. I don't think most people are going to go to war with Russia. If they want to go to war, people could go fight on their own. The people that are going to push for it. But other than that, it's just like, why would anybody want to even go do this? It's like, let's just be diplomatic. I mean, one of the things could be, okay, to get Putin out of there, get someone else in there. No one else is going to go. Who could take his spot though? That's the thing. So, but I mean, that could be something. And then it's like, we'll just go back to being like allies, like after the Cold War, right after the Cold War, the United States and Russia were allies until all this stuff happened. And then the conflict is stupid because Hillary Clinton and people like that, John McCain, everyone kept on saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. We need to fight against Russia. If they wouldn't have done that, then we probably would have encroached on Ukraine and tried to get them into NATO because people wouldn't have been scared of it. And then all this nonsense probably wouldn't even have happened. So just calm down the rhetoric. Get out of Ukraine. If this stuff does happen, watch out for it. Be smart about it. And just don't go to war. Diplomacy is the way to go. It's not it's like I said, it's not Hitler or Japan from 100 years ago when they just wanted power. Russia just wants its land bridge just in case for security, I mean, China kind of wants power, but I don't think they have the means to do it. So it doesn't, that kind of matters. But I think they would negotiate anyways. Xi Jinping's also going to negotiate. They're not just madmen like before, like 100 years ago, right? They're somewhat reasonable. So, yeah, there's no point to go to war.
If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for daily news updates, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and share your thoughts on the story in the comments below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.